Welcome to our annual harvest celebration. My father's voice rang out across the beautifully decorated barn at River Edge Vineyard. Today marks an exciting new chapter in our family's legacy. We're thrilled to announce that Andrea, fresh off completing her MBA, will officially be taking over as CEO. The crowd erupted into applause while I sat frozen, my wine glass halfway to my lips. 6 months ago, I had transferred my entire life savings to save this vineyard from foreclosure. And now, I was watching my younger sister step forward, glowing in her designer dress, the same sister who had never spent a single day working in the fields. My name is Jessica, and I'm 35 years old. I built my investment consulting firm from scratch, turning it into a successful business without ever asking my parents for a single dime. While Andrea was off earning her MBA, fully funded by our parents, I was pulling 60-hour weeks, learning the hard way what real success meant. That's why, when my parents called me 6 months ago in tears about the foreclosure notice from the bank, I transferred $850,000, my entire life savings, without a second thought. We're family, they said. We trust each other. With her formal education and fresh perspective, my father continued, Andrea will lead River Edge into a new era of innovation and growth. She has the perfect blend of business expertise and understanding of our family's legacy. I watched Andrea soak in the congratulations, the same sister who spent her college years staging Instagram-worthy photo shoots at the vineyard instead of learning about soil quality or fermentation techniques. The same sister who, last Christmas, couldn't tell the difference between a Cabernet and a Merlot during a blind tasting. My mother placed a gentle hand on my arm. Jessica, honey, I hope you understand. Andrea's degree makes her the natural choice to handle the business side of things. I cut her off with a warm smile, hiding the cold ache forming in my chest. Of course, Mom. Andrea will do great. I raised my glass, keeping my voice steady as though none of this affected me. To the new CEO of River Edge. I excused myself, stepping outside into the cool evening air. Pulling out my phone, I scrolled down to a contact I never thought I'd need. Rachel Thompson, a ruthless corporate attorney I'd met at a few wine industry events. I need your help with a family business matter, I texted. Can you meet tomorrow? Her reply was almost immediate. 10 a.m. at my office. Bring all relevant documentation. The next morning, I sat across from Rachel in her sleek downtown Dallas office, sunlight glinting off the steel and glass windows. She flipped through the bank records showing the $850,000 transfer into River Edge's account. Rachel looked up. Let me get this straight. You transferred your entire life savings without any written contract, not even a promissory note? They're my family, I said, the words now leaving a bitter taste in my mouth. When they called me crying, all I could think about was preserving our legacy. 3 generations of winemaking about to disappear because they over-leveraged the vineyard to fund Andrea's MBA and that ridiculously expensive tasting room she insisted they needed. Rachel leaned back in her chair. And now they've made her CEO after your money saved the place. She paused, then asked, what exactly did they promise you when you made the transfer? I closed my eyes, remembering the desperation in their voices that night. Dad had promised I would have a permanent role in the business. Mom kept saying they would make sure I was taken care of. I opened my eyes, anger simmering just beneath the surface. Instead, they're treating my contribution like some kind of family obligation. Did anyone witness these promises? I straightened my posture. Yes. Their accountant Michael was there when I wired the money. He actually suggested we put something in writing, but my parents brushed him off, said it would be insulting to suggest family couldn't be trusted. Rachel's eyes lit up. Michael could be incredibly useful, but first I need to understand what you want. Do you want control of the vineyard? I shook my head. I want my money back, every cent with interest. Let Andrea keep her fancy title. I'll use my money to buy my own vineyard, one they'll have to compete with. Rachel smiled, all sharp edges. Perfect. I have a plan. Your parents' actions qualify as verbal fraud. With Michael's testimony and these bank records, we can build a solid case. But instead of filing immediately, we'll start with a demand letter. She opened a fresh notebook. We'll demand full repayment, $850,000 plus 8% annual interest, within 30 days. We'll also request all financial records from the date your investment was received. Something tells me we'll find some interesting spending decisions after they got your money. I felt a weight begin to lift from my chest. And if they refuse? Rachel's smile sharpened. Then we file a lawsuit and we force them to open their books for public scrutiny. Something tells me Andrea's MBA didn't prepare her for that level of crisis management. The demand letter landed like a bombshell at River Edge. I was at home working when my phone rang. Andrea's name flashing on the screen. Her voice was shrill with panic. A lawsuit? Are you out of your mind? You're going to destroy everything our family built. Her screech filled my ear. Dad's having chest pains because of you. I stayed calm, letting her rant. The solution's simple. Return my investment, $850,000 plus 8% interest for the past 6 months. You've got an MBA, Andrea. I'm sure you can do the math. That money went into saving this vineyard, your heritage too, and now you want to bankrupt us to get it back? Andrea's voice was sharp, but there was a sly undertone creeping into it. Besides, she added, your fancy lawyer should know verbal agreements in family businesses are messy. You can't prove anything. I smiled, even though she couldn't see me. Actually, I just got off the phone with Michael. Remember him? Your accountant? He's already provided a sworn statement about the day I made the transfer, including how he advised putting everything in writing and how Dad promised me a secured place in the business. There was silence on the line, the kind of silence that tastes like panic. Then, after a few muffled sounds, Andrea spoke again. Hold on, Dad wants to talk to you. My father's voice came through the phone, heavy with frustration and barely restrained anger. Jessica, what are you doing to us, after everything we've done for you? Everything you've done for me? I cut him off. Let's review that, shall we? You paid for Andrea's MBA, her car, her apartment, every advantage. Meanwhile, I built my own life, my own career, without asking for a dime. The only time I asked for anything was when you promised me a future here, in exchange for saving the vineyard. We never promised you control, he said defensively. Andrea has the education for this. I'm not asking for control, I said, my voice firm. I'm asking for my money back, money you took, knowing exactly what you plan to do with it. His tone softened, shifting to the coaxing voice he always used when trying to smooth things over. Sweetheart, be reasonable. The vineyard doesn't have that kind of cash lying around. We'd have to take out another loan. Then I suggest you start talking to the bank. I glanced at the clock. You have 25 days left before I file the lawsuit. And Dad, just so you know, every financial decision made since my investment will be under scrutiny, including Andrea's new Mercedes and that little market research trip you and Mom took to Tuscany. There was a rustling sound on the other end. Muted conversations I couldn't make out. Then my mom came on the line, her voice quivering. Jessica, please, she pleaded, come home for dinner. We can talk about this as a family. I shook my head, even though she couldn't see me. We're not family right now, Mom. We're business associates in the middle of a dispute. If you have anything to say, have your lawyer call Rachel." I hung up, my hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from the sheer weight of it all. My phone immediately started lighting up with messages from relatives, some begging me to reconsider, others accusing me of being ungrateful or heartless. I ignored them all, opened my laptop, and started browsing available vineyard listings in the next county. If River's Edge thought they were irreplaceable, they were about to find out how wrong they were. The following week, something unexpected happened. Michael, the vineyard's accountant, called me directly, his voice low and urgent. "We need to meet. There's something you need to see." We chose a quiet cafe far from River's Edge, and Michael arrived clutching a thick folder. His hands shook slightly as he set it down in front of me. "I've been going through the books," he said, voice tight. "Since your investment came in, the numbers, they don't make sense." I opened the folder and stared at the spreadsheets inside. Entire rows were highlighted in bright yellow. Michael leaned over, pointing at specific entries. "Your $850,000 didn't just go toward paying off the foreclosure. It covered a lot of personal expenses, all disguised as business costs. The Mercedes was labeled as a delivery vehicle. The Tuscany trip was filed under market research, and even chunks of Andrea's MBA were retroactively categorized as employee training." My stomach turned. "So they used my money for all of this?" Michael nodded grimly. "It gets worse. About 2 weeks before they announced Andrea as CEO, they registered a new company, River's Edge Holdings, LLC. They've been systematically transferring the vineyard's assets into this shell company. The original business, the one you invested in, is being hollowed out." The realization hit like a gut punch. They hadn't just taken my money. They were dismantling the very business they promised to protect, ensuring I'd be left with nothing. "Rachel needs to see this," Michael added, his voice low. "But you didn't get this from me. I've already started looking for a new job. I can't be part of this." I reached for my phone ready to call Rachel, but it buzzed first. A text from Andrea. "Family meeting tonight. Don't bring your lawyer. Last chance to settle this like family." I showed the text to Michael, who shook his head. "They know I've been digging into the records. They're going to try to guilt you into backing off, maybe even threaten me." I thought back to all the family meetings of my childhood, where my parents twisted every situation to protect Andrea from the consequences of her actions, usually by blaming me. I texted Andrea back. "Any discussions will happen with lawyers present." Her reply came instantly. "Your choice. But don't come crying when this gets ugly." I forwarded everything, Michael's documents, the texts, to Rachel. Her reaction was immediate. "This is exactly what we needed," she said. "This isn't just civil fraud anymore. This borders on criminal. We're sending an amended demand letter today. They now have 48 hours to return your money, or we involve the SEC and the IRS." After hanging up, I sat at the cafe long after Michael left, staring at the stack of evidence in front of me. Guilt tried to creep in, guilt for what this would do to my family. But I thought about every time they'd dismissed my hard work, every time they'd favored Andrea, every time they'd treated me like an outsider in my own family's legacy. I opened my laptop and pulled up the listing for Marshall Creek Vineyard, 200 acres of prime land, right across the valley from River's Edge. Perfect soil, excellent sun exposure, and best of all, a direct view of my parents' vineyard. The amended demand letter landed like a lightning strike. I was halfway through a virtual tour of the Marshall Creek property when my front door burst open. My father stormed in, waving the letter. "Criminal charges?" he shouted, face red with anger. "Your own family? I raised you better than this? I calmly minimized the listing on my screen. Did you raise me to be cheated? Because that's exactly what you did. You took my $850,000 and spent it on luxuries, all while plotting to cut me out. We never meant save it. My voice was firm. I saw the financials, the LLC, the asset transfers, all of it. You didn't just betray me. You tried to make sure I couldn't fight back. I stood up, facing him. You have 40 hours left. After that, Rachel files everything with the SEC and the IRS. His face drained of color. You'll ruin Andrea's future. She's just getting started. Andrea's future? I laughed. What about mine? I worked for every dollar I gave you while she spent her MBA posting photo shoots in the Vineyard. You promised me a future, and you gave me nothing. He tried one last offer. Maybe Andrea could share leadership with you, co-CEOs. I shook my head. I don't want to share anything with Andrea. I want my money back, with interest. After that, you'll never have to worry about me again. As if on cue, my phone rang. The real estate agent from Marshall Creek. I answered on speaker. Hi, Jessica. Great news. The seller loves your offer. They'd like to move forward with you. When can we meet to finalize terms? I looked at my father, my expression unreadable. I'm free tomorrow. I watched my father's face crumble as the realization hit him. Marshall Creek wasn't just any vineyard. It was River's Edge's biggest competition back when my grandfather ran things. Their wines had consistently beaten ours in blind tastings until the original owner retired and the vineyard fell into disrepair. You wouldn't, he whispered, his voice almost pleading. I gave him a calm, almost pitying smile. Wouldn't what? Start my own vineyard? Compete with the business that took my money and shut me out? Dad, I learned everything I know about winemaking from Grandpa. Everything. While Andrea was taking selfies in the tasting room, I was out in the fields with him, testing soil pH and watching weather patterns. Your grandfather would be ashamed. He tried one last emotional dagger, hoping it would land. No, Dad, I said softly. He'd be proud. Proud that I'm not letting you and Andrea ruin everything he built with your greed. I turned back to my laptop. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a property to buy. Tick-tock on that 40 hours. He left without another word, the front door slamming behind him. Within minutes, my phone was vibrating with a flood of messages from Andrea. How dare you threaten Dad like that? You're just jealous of my success. Mom's crying because of you. I blocked her number without replying and returned to the Marshall Creek listing. The property needed work, but the bones were solid. More importantly, the vineyard's premium grapes and higher elevation would let me produce wines that could go head-to-head with River's Edge's best sellers and win. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Rachel. They're panicking, she said. Their lawyer's been calling banks all day, trying to scrape together a loan. I smiled. No matter how this ended, I was already winning. Either I'd get my money back or I'd get Marshall Creek, and River's Edge would finally face real competition. 12 hours before the deadline, my mother showed up at my office, a thick manila envelope clutched in her hands. Her expression was the same one she used when she tried to make peace between Andrea and me as kids, tired, manipulative, and full of forced sincerity. Your father's been sedated, she said dramatically as she lowered herself into the chair across from my desk. His blood pressure is dangerously high. Are you happy now? I didn't rise to the bait. What's in the envelope, Mom? She pushed it across the desk, lips tight. The best we could do. We mortgaged everything we could. There's $600,000 here. That's all the bank would approve. We'll pay the rest in installments. I didn't touch the envelope. That wasn't the deal. $850,000 plus interest, all of it. Or Rachel files tomorrow morning. Her peacemaker mask slipped, revealing the frustration underneath. We don't have it, she snapped. Andrea's called every bank in Texas. None of them will give us another dime without doing a full audit, and you know we can't allow that. Because of what they'll find, I said softly. Like how my investment paid for Andrea's MBA instead of saving the vineyard, and how you've been moving assets into that new LLC to cut me out completely? Her face froze. How did you... I have copies of everything, Mom. My voice stayed calm. Every transfer, every fake expense, every fraudulent line item. Did you really think no one would notice? She leaned in, switching to guilt. Think about what you're doing, Jessica. If you file those papers, you won't just hurt us. You'll ruin the vineyard's reputation. The workers, the distributors, all the families who depend on us, you'll destroy everything just to get revenge on your sister. I didn't blink. Don't you dare put this on me. My voice was low but sharp. You and Dad made these choices the moment you stole from me. You're the ones who put everyone's jobs at risk, not me. We didn't steal, she protested weakly. I turned my laptop around, showing her the Marshall Creek listing. Take a good look. Perfect soil, better sun exposure, and enough land to double River's Edge's production. The owner signs it over to me tomorrow morning, unless I get my money first. Her hand trembled slightly. You can't. That land, it would destroy us. Then you and Andrea better get creative in the next 11 hours. I stood. Sell her car, mortgage the house, call in favors. I don't care how you do it, but I want every cent back. She stood slowly, shaking her head. You've changed, Jessica. You've become cold, cruel. No, Mom. I met her eyes unflinching. I've just stopped letting you manipulate me. Now, the money or the lawsuit, it's your choice. After she left, I called Rachel. They tried to negotiate, offered a partial payment. Rachel snorted. They're desperate. Hold the line. Their lawyer's been calling everyone. Minutes later, my email pinged with a message from the Marshall Creek realtor. Owner ready to meet first thing tomorrow to finalize the deal. I replied to confirm and texted Andrea one last time. 11 hours left. Tick-tock. Her reply was instant. You're making a huge mistake. Our lawyer says we can tie this up in court for years. I responded with a single photo, the panoramic view from Marshall Creek's highest point, overlooking River's Edge. Andrea knew it well. She'd posed for dozens of photos there back when the vineyard was still open. Her reply was a string of angry emojis. The clock was ticking, and I had them exactly where I wanted. With just 2 hours left, I sat in Rachel's office reviewing 2 folders, one for the SEC filing, the other for the Marshall Creek purchase. Outside the window, the Dallas skyline glowed in the dusk, the sky a rich shade of red, the color of our old Cabernet Reserve. Their lawyers called 4 times in the last hour, Rachel said. They're out of options. My phone rang. Michael. Emergency board meeting at River's Edge, he said quietly. Andrea's locked herself in the bathroom. Your mother's threatening to expose something about your father if he doesn't fix this. Another call came in. James Turner, Andrea's ex-boyfriend and now a loan officer at First Regional Bank. The Vineyard's records are a mess, he said. No emergency loan without a full audit. But there's one option, a regional bank investment program. They'll take control, put their own people on the board and demand total transparency. I texted my father. There's a solution. Call James Turner. You have 90 minutes. Andrea's response was instant. You're giving the vineyard to outsiders? Grandpa would hate you. I thought about Grandpa's hands in the soil, his voice teaching me how to read the vines. His last words to me echoed in my mind. The grapes don't care about degrees, Jessie. They care about love and work. 30 minutes, Rachel reminded me. My phone buzzed. Michael again. Your father's reviewing documents with the bank. Andrea's crying. Your mom's half hysterical. At 10 minutes to deadline, my father called. The bank's taking control. 2 board seats, full audits. Fine, I said. Sign it, transfer my money, and I'll walk away. Your mother says you won't go through with the SEC, he tried. You have 8 minutes to find out. 2 minutes before the deadline, my phone buzzed. $850,000 plus interest transferred to my account. Rachel smiled. Looks like they chose survival over pride. I called the realtor. I'm ready to close on Marshall Creek. 2 months later, I stood on my new land at Sunset Valley Vineyard with Michael as my CFO, watching workers plant new vines. Across the valley, I could see River's Edge. Andrea would have her vineyard, but now she'd have me as her competition. I didn't need their approval anymore. I had something better, a legacy of my own. Let's make some wine, I said.